Sitting on 70 acres of beautiful land in Barrington, Rhode Island, and just miles away from the city of Providence, St. Andrews, a college prep school serving grades 6 through 12, including a postgraduate year, has been welcoming students from many cultures, backgrounds, faiths, and learning profiles for the past 125 years. Currently, the school enrolls over 225 students, but it all started with just one. In the late 1800s, immigration rates in the United States rose sharply. Providence was no exception, and by 1865, Providence's population had grown to 54,000. This population spike also increased the local poverty line, and the children were impacted the most. Father Chapin, the rector of St. John's Church in Barrington, Rhode Island, was a man looking to help these children in time of need. For 2 years prior, Father Chapin ruminated on establishing a school for boys who were vulnerable to poverty, violence, and hunger. The first student of his new school was an orphan named Walter Lawless. Walter arrived from the Society of Prevention of Cruelty to Children in 1893, though there is a long, fondly held belief Father Chapin met the child begging at a train station. Father Chapin and Walter Lawless traveled from downtown Providence to Rumstick Point in Barrington, where they took up residence in a barn in which Father Chapin had been renting. Father Chapin had a simple mission. He desired to create a warm and loving home for impoverished boys to learn self-sustenance. Father Chapin's goal of such innovative missionary work rode the first waves of transforming the way society saw and responded to the welfare of impoverished children. He began this mission with Lawless, and soon they started work on building the first schoolhouse. In 1894, the school had grown to 5 boys. During the fair months of the year, the boys built the little schoolhouse with their own toil. They slept in the rafters and were instructed in religious studies in the room below. Today, upon graduation, every graduate of St. Andrews walks through this building. In 1895, the school moved to its current location in Barrington. Father Chapin leased a 10-acre property known as Bicknell Farm. The property contained one house which was in terrible disrepair. This house would eventually be known as the Rectory. In 1897, Hardy Hall was built as a gift of Mrs. Louise N. Hardy, the school's first house mother, in memory of her husband. This building provided the school classrooms and its first gymnasium and is currently the St. Andrews Middle School. In 1898, Bishop Clark Hall was erected. Clark Hall was meant to accommodate 20 boys and one house mother. Clark Hall also served as the first dining hall for the community. In 1902, Perry Farm was purchased. This property included 30 acres of land and a large barn. Perry Farm provided a house for the school farmer and lodging for 10 of the older boys. From the beginning, St. Andrews quickly became an almost self-sustaining community. The boys sowed and harvested the land, raised animals for work and food, and made a small profit from selling milk and cream from their very own cows. This milk was bottled at the school and distributed across Rhode Island. In addition to milk, the boys produced eggs, potatoes, and vegetables, which they used to feed nearly the entire community of the school. But the farm was not only a source of sustenance. From the 11th annual report of St. Andrews Industrial School in 1906, the original idea of a farm school was to provide a country life for boys. If we can train some boys to be modern gardeners so as to be competent to take charge of the grounds and gardens of private houses, we shall furnish a fine trade to the boys and supply a need of the public. While the farm continued to provide a bit of revenue for the school, it was eventually phased out in the 1960s. In 1910, the plan for beautifying the grounds and locating future buildings was accepted, and the Olmsted brothers were hired. The Olmsted brothers were an influential landscape architectural firm in the United States and the sons of the renowned Central Park designer in New York City. The president of the St. Andrews Industrial School Corporation passed away in 1910. Shortly after, the McVicker Memorial Building was built. This building held up to 62 kids and allowed the age of admission to be lowered from age 10 to age 6. The little boys were transferred from St. Mary's Orphanage in Rhode Island, whose goal was to establish a similar industrial school for girls as Father Chapin had for boys. St. Mary's is still in existence, working on behalf of children and families in southern Rhode Island. The first St. Andrew's diplomas were given out in 1917, but the first official high school graduation class wouldn't come until 1940. In 1920, Gardner Hall construction started and was completed in 1926. Gardner Hall is the current dining hall for students and faculty. On March 8, 1921, the founder, warden, and chaplain of St. Andrew's Industrial School passed, leaving a 28-year legacy of changing the lives of young men. His loss was greatly felt across the community. Father Chapin was remembered as a man with a warm handclasp and a cheerful greeting, and a friend to all whom he came in contact with. His vision for improving the lives of the most vulnerable children by providing them with a home and skills for self-sustenance still persists. In 1922, Father Chapin was succeeded by Reverend Albert Crabtree as the new headmaster of the school, followed by Reverend Irving Andrews Evans in 1937, Herbert W. Spink in 1947, and Stephen G. Waters in 1970. In 1946, Chapin Chapel was erected. The chapel was in dedication to Father Chapin and currently sits adjacent to the original schoolhouse from so many years ago. Between 1965 and 1970, 3 new buildings were erected on campus. Jones Gymnasium was the first, followed by the 2 dormitories Katie House and Bill's House. In 2012, the dorms were renovated and Katie House was renamed Margot's House. The 80s were a turning point for women. The first female served on the Supreme Court. The first female astronaut traveled into space. And in 1981, the first females were allowed to enroll as day students at St. Andrews. Shortly after, in 1984, women were allowed to start boarding here as well. In 1988, the Reverend Owings Stone Academic Center was built. This building currently houses numerous classrooms as well as the library. In 1992, Everett J. Wilson became the next headmaster for the St. Andrews School, followed by David Burnham in 1995, and followed shortly after by John D. Martin in 1996. In 1993, the student enrollment had reached 147. This was also the school's centennial year. Celebrations began at the 3rd annual Pops concert. Nearly 1,000 friends and supporters listened to the Rhode Island Philharmonic perform Under the Stars on the school's front lawn. The Maxwell Mays painting of the campus auctioned for $11,500. In 2000, the McCulloch family purchased the 28.5 acres of farmland from St. Andrews and donated it to the town to be used almost exclusively as open space. In 2004, the 27,000 square foot McCulloch Arts Center was finished. The building contains a main stage and black box theater, art studios, music rooms, and a recently upgraded Mac computer lab. In 2015, the school inducted Mr. David J. Tinajero as the current headmaster of the St. Andrews School. Today, the school remains a vibrant, diverse community which fosters intellectual, emotional, physical, and spiritual learning in the classroom and beyond. Carrying forth the tradition of Father Chapin, St. Andrews students are charged with the task of becoming agents of change. As each student crosses the threshold of the little sanctuary on their graduation day, they are making a commitment to making the world a better place. Today, as we honor the past, the community of St. Andrews continues to rise up to embrace the future with hearts filled with hope. It is with this hope that we have the capacity to create change.